Welcome to the Black Paper. My name is Ndukoya Noha.
And I'm Cheta Wanzi.
Chita, are we back to being grumpy? What happened? Didn't you have, or did you have too much fun at Notting Hill Carnival?
You dragged me out of bed, so what are you talking about?
Well, the show must go on, as they say. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about flags, the politics of flags, and why there seems to be so many flags going up everywhere, and just what the brouhaha is about keeping them up, taking them down, and ultimately what they mean for us. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, Jetta, but the St. George's Cross is flying everywhere, all over England right now. Normally, and if you think of St. George's flags, for me personally, I always just think of the people that paint themselves, their bodies during football matches. It's supposed to be a symbol of pride, isn't it? A symbol of unity. But what has happened now is that it's becoming a battleground. On one side, there's accusation of racism and far right appropriation. On the other side, cries of political correctness and a war on English pride. But what really um does the flag mean, and why is it causing so much tension? So Cheta, what was this flag brouhaha?
Okay, I think it's important to first explain, especially to our target audience, who many of whom have come to the UK fairly recently. Most of them know the Union Jack, which is the popular flag of the United Kingdom, the red cross in a blue background with a red inverted cross, or X, as some people will say. That's the flag of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. But the United Kingdom is made up of constituent countries. You have England, you have Northern Ireland, you have Scotland, and you have Wales. And until 1916, I think, Ireland was part of the United Kingdom. Um, so the each of these four constituents have their own flag. So the flag, the St. George's Cross that you referred to, is the flag of England. It's a red cross on a white background. The St. Andrew's Cross is the flag of Scotland. It's a blue, it's a white cross on a blue background. Some people will say a white X, but an X is also a cross. Then there's the flag of Wales, which is the red dragon. They have a Welsh name for it, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce just yet. Maybe when I start learning Welsh, I would come to try that. That has a red dragon on a white and green background. And then finally, you have the flag of Northern Ireland, which it's a very sectarian flag. It's the flag of the Ulster the All-Star group. So you have a St. George's Cross with a banner, a six-pointed star, and a hand that calls the red hand of Ulster. Ulster being the Protestant region of Northern Ireland, or of Ireland, who want to remain a part of Great Britain, while the rest, the Catholic part, want to rejoin the Republic of Ireland. So what has been happening recently is what some people call raise the colors.
Oh, and you forgot
Um,
there's a crown on top of the Ulster hand.
there's a crown on top of that. Basically, yes, thank you for that reminder, which basically um, speaks to their loyalist tendencies. They want to be a part of the United Kingdom. That's the All-Star guys. I think is important. I can't name all the regions of Northern Ireland off the top of my head, but the Catholic regions want to rejoin the Republic of Ireland. It's one of the reasons why they had the troubles back in the 60s and 70s. But the Good Friday agreements ended all that, and we had peace as a result of the fact that both Britain and Ireland were part of the EU, which guaranteed free movement. So there was no need for a hard border. Of course, that's one of the pains of Brexit, but we're deviating. What has been happening recently is something called Operation Raise the Colors. Operation Raise the Colors is basically a campaign that started this year, which claims that it aims to promote patriotism among British people. So it's encourages people to fly the national flag, and the flags of the countries which make up the United Kingdom. One of the more interesting things I saw on one of the right-wing accounts was the flags that they displayed included the flag of the Republic of Ireland. And I'm looking at it and like, hang on, are you sure the Irish will be happy to be part of this? Now, the whole idea behind Operation Raise the Colors started organically. During the Women's Euro 2025 tournament, there was a lot of flag waving, especially given that the English team went all the way to the final and eventually won the whole thing. Sporting events have always been associated with flag waving and national pride. I mean, as a Nigerian, I'm sure you remember how proud we felt
Mm.
when we won the Olympic gold medal in football in Atlanta 96. I'm sure you remember how proud we felt when Nigeria won the Nations Cup in South Africa in 2013. I was in Johannesburg at the time, and I was walking around all over with my Super Eagles jersey. Sporting events have a way of bringing out national pride. And given the history of Europe, there are some countries, and Germany, I'm looking at you here, that have that kind of like they know where national pride can lead. National pride, while it's a good thing, taken too far, it can lead to racism, nationalism, all of those isms that are not good. So the Germans especially have a way of talking in their national pride, but sporting events brings that out. So what happened here was that a couple of months ago, this was I mean, not a couple of months, just last month, July, when the England team was going far in the tournament, people began to wave their flags very proudly. And then some people said, oh, let us continue promoting patriotism by showing the flag. What has now happened, and this is where the controversy is coming, is that far right groups are now being accused and are now co-opting that movement. What should otherwise be a good movement, talking about displaying national pride, being used to fuel anti-immigration sentiments. Far right activists such as Tommy Robinson or there's this far right group Britain First
Mm.
are encouraging people, and I think one of the things that stood out for me yesterday evening was the fact that was it yesterday evening or Saturday? I think it was Saturday. People who went around in the dead of nights, trying to hang St. George's flags, that's England flags in various places, were masked. And that begs the question: if you are so proud of what you are doing, why are you hiding behind a mask? And
You know,
that's where the issues come in.
and it's quite interesting you bring that up because we've seen that. I've seen that especially well in my ward, where um, overnight I was having a conversation with some people, and uh, on Friday or so, there were no flags. I'm like, huh, that's interesting because I know this word. If I know anything about this word, flags will go up here. And overnight, we just wake up and suddenly there are flags everywhere. And but also understanding the politics of it, as you've said, because like, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, this has gone beyond um, the sports team or the English team. It has been for most part, it's been co-opted uh, by not just the far right, but people who hope that it will instigate some sort of conversation that would lead to trouble. So I made a post, being a counselor in the ward, saying, look, I understand that people want to fly the flag. Of course, be proud of your flag, of the flag, but there are those who want to take this and turn it into tension. They don't represent us. Now, what happened under that post is quite interesting. So for the first few posts were like, yes, we agree. This is about pride. Yes, there are a few people who are trying to cause trouble, but a day or so after, of course, the conversation around politics started. It's getting very heated. People throwing insults at each other. People saying, "Oh, so you're happy for known men to be talking to our women and children. We want them out." This is it, isn't it? A symbol that something that's supposed to be a symbol for national unity is now being is like a line in the political sand, so that even those who want to feel proud of their country are almost scared that they will be seen as being racist. And those who are not, or just don't want, or as they say, as the kids will say, they don't want the smoke. So the thing is there a way to take back this symbol of national unity without stoking those issues of racism? And I to maybe to tie that in, I also want you to talk about how some councils, where have they been right to start taking down the flags without really thinking about the political fallout?
So it's this is a loaded question, and it's so first things first. It's important to say that people flying their national flag, especially when they're proud of their country, is absolutely right from where I'm standing. I would support. So I'm not British. Um, I'm not English, but twice in my life, Britain has given me a home. Where we can talk about the details of that in another episode. So, British people wanting to fly their flags, English people wanting to fly their flags, I don't have a problem with it. It sits well. It's fine. It sits well with me. However, when you now start having, and this is where I think city councils such as, I think it was Birmingham that started that first, city councils like Birmingham, and then Tower Hamlets, when they start removing those flags, I think specifically Birmingham claimed for safety reasons, you end up inflaming tensions inadvertently, and you end up also inadvertently ceding the political ground to the right, to the far right, because it makes it easy for them to push a narrative, which many of them have been pushing, that, oh, it has become wrong to fly our own flag in our own country. They are taking over. And for me, as an expert, when I hear they are taking over, who are the they? They're talking about me. And that's when you now begin to cross quietly from pride into intimidation. And this is where I think the political class get it wrong. So rightly, Kemi Badenoch, Nigel Farage, and Keir Starmer have welcomed and defended the flying of the flags very correctly. But at the same time, they have not, in my view, especially Kemi, who is black, and then Keir Starmer, who is the prime minister, they have not done enough to assure the other population, especially given the history or the fact that you have black people, as an example, who are British and have been here at least since 1948, but are still told things like, go back to where you come from. So when you consider someone like Dominic Raab as an example, no one will question his Britishness. Dominic Raab being the former deputy prime minister, I think under Boris Johnson, but don't quote me on that specifically. His parents, I think, came to the UK from as a fallout of the Second World War. They were refugees in the UK. But he happens to be white. A generation later, nobody's questioning his Britishness. He will happily fly the flag. Nigel Farage, his kids are German or are part German. Nigel Farage's own family came to the UK, so let's forget his kids. Nigel Farage married a German woman. His kids' first language is German. But Nigel Farage himself, I think it was his grandfather or great-grandfather who came to the UK from France, I believe. Even named Farage. Farage is French in origin. But now he's doing all the whole Britain first. So the question becomes, how deep do you have to go before you are considered English? One. Number two, what color must your skin be before you are considered English? I mean, it reminds us of what happened to Ngozi Fulani
Mhm.
when she was asked by an aide to the late queen, where are you from? I mean, this was somebody who was three generations in. Um, Now I disagree with, and so we have two schools of thought that are emerging among the BIM population, Black and minority ethnic population. So you have for example, the academic Kehinde Andrews, who, for the Nigerians listening, he's not of Nigerian descent, he's of Caribbean descent, but his parents liked the name Kehinde and they gave it to him. So Kehinde Andrews is British, but I think it was his grandparents who came to the UK as part of the Windrush generation. Kehinde Andrews says the St. George's Cross is a symbol of racism. I completely disagree with that. The Zimbabwean descent singer Rachel Shinriri has said that the flag can be reclaimed, and I agree with her completely. The flag can and should be reclaimed, but one thing we must understand and we have to accept is that flags are a symbol of the people, of their history, of the country. So flying a flag should not be seen as a negative. The problem, I think one of the issues is the fact that, um, and this is not just a UK problem, it's a Western problem generally. Politicians have, and that would include you, my friend, politicians have forgotten how to say hard things to their say unpopular things to their constituents. Instead, they are always looking at polls, looking at the next election, and then thinking of what message would be easier for the people to accept. What will make me look good so
Mm.
that I'll win the next election. They are not thinking of they are not thinking of the good of the country. They're thinking of the next election. And I think that is the root of the entire problem.
And that is a very poignant point, Cheta. And I agree. We politicians often shy away because we're wondering, oh my God, what will someone say? What will the polls say? What will they say on Facebook? And and how that reflects on us. And this is why I'm quite dismayed that there isn't really there's really isn't much pushback with the narrative around, oh, they're taking our jobs and all that, because as we've said in a few episodes, the real reason or what happens is when politicians lose control of the economy. We've seen this. It is a historical trope that just keeps playing out. Someone always gets to be blamed for the woes of the people. So when the German economy was failing, oh look, it's the Jews. When the Nigerian economy was failing, oh look, it's the Ghanaians. And now when this economy isn't doing as good as is being projected, especially after the disaster of Brexit, suddenly the person who masterminded that stupid decision to extricate England out of the European Economic Union suddenly turns around, and rather than say, hey, I scammed all of you, this was, for me, it was just trophy hunting. What he's saying is,
Are you expecting Nigel Farage to openly
no, no, of
admit?
course not. Of course, no, he's a grifter, so he's not going to do that. However, what I'm really disappointed in is the fact that the government is also not saying, look, guys, the problem we're having now, we can draw a line straight to Brexit. Instead, everyone is running around, hiding behind, oh yeah, carry on, fly the flag. And of course, people should fly their flag. However, people should know that the reason that the economy is doing poorly is because England is no longer in the EU, and that has taken away a lot of its opportunities.
I mean, what you've just said, it harks back to what I said earlier about the fact that the political class, and again, I'm always at pains to stress that it's not just a British thing. The political class in the West generally have forgotten how to tell. So you are not going to get. It's going to be extremely difficult to find a politician who will say like Churchill that I only have blood, sweat, and tears to offer. you are going to find it hard to see a politician like Clement Attlee who will tell his people point blank, we need to rebuild the country. We need people from different parts of the country. It was Clement Attlee that opened the door to the Windrush generation because they needed to rebuild the country. He was the one who told, despite the fact that that era was the era of McCarthyism in the States, he told the British people point blank, we need socialized healthcare. And that's where the NHS came from. You are not going to see politicians who are willing to be that bold anymore. It's a tragedy. So what a British politician needs to be able to tell the British people, especially the English, but the British people writ large, is, hey, we're no longer we're no longer an empire. We're a small country in the corner of Northwest Europe that is of middling global significance in reality of global importance historically. But we have not been an empire since 1956. And because we have not been an empire since 1956, we have to accept what we are. First things first, you can't go about alienating your near abroad. And with the exception of Africa, in every other part of the world, people trade with their neighbors. And it's one of the things that we need to correct in Africa. Your biggest trading partners have to be your near abroad. Otherwise, you are going to have a hard time of it. I don't hear that message coming. I don't see Keir Starmer telling his people that we need closer ties. Okay, I understand that politically doing a second referendum to get back into the EU is impossible at this point in time, but we need closer ties with the Europeans. We need to do this. Verschaffen Angela Merkel, she was the last politician in Europe who could look her people in the eye and tell them a hard truth. Nowadays, it's just weak guys all over the place looking. I mean, a very, very solid example of what the European political class has become was that picture of all of them sitting like spoiled little schoolboys in front of Donald Trump last week. Donald
No,
Trump did everybody a favor because he showed everybody what the European political class have become.
see that picture was hard. It was difficult to look at
I mean, I can
because
assure you,
God.
Unjukwe, if you take that picture, go to where Charles de Gaulle is buried and put it in front of Charles de Gaulle will come out of his grave and scream. He will not believe what he's saying.
It was terrible because I saw that picture and I couldn't. It took me, it gave me like some sort of like flashback, being called to the principal's office in secondary school, like when they write the list of noisemakers or when you've become terribly terrible.
There was
And
a tweet that accompanied that someone I've forgotten who, I think he's a Kenyan guy. He said European leaders finally getting the African leader treatment. I mean, it's significant that that thing was happening at the same time that African leaders, that thing that annoys me a lot. So all the African leaders will gather together on a plane and go to one country. I mean, it's happened the same week as TICAD in Japan, where all the African leaders were there. Like, why?
in fact, it's quite interesting that you mentioned Japan because I think a few episodes ago, remember we spoke about the unwillingness of Japan to integrate, not properly, I won't say properly, but to be as open to integration as the rest of the world is. However, just as you've mentioned, African leaders got on a plane and went to do a beauty parade for the Japanese. The Japanese government announced that it has unveiled 4 cities for most African, or for 4 African countries as in quotes a hometown. And again, this is what we know is you can't call it integration. Some people argue that it's brain drain.
Please.
Some people will say that the Japanese
It's
have finally looked at their dwindling birth rate and said, like, we need more people. Whatever it is, it's a pipeline for yet more migrants to
and
move
the
from
same thing
Africa.
that happened in the UK, in Canada will happen again. Basically, the Japanese will take who they need and then raise the drawbridge. Japanese involvement in Africa really started in 1974 when the foreign minister at the time, Toshio Kimura, and this brings me back to that far-sighted leadership. So Toshio Kimura saw that Japan's birth rates were already plummeting. This is before I was born. He already saw that there was a problem. So he began to make outreaches to Africa. He did a tour of 5 African countries, including Nigeria and Ghana. And he was the one who organized the first TICAD. And he told these people, we will need at some point to start accepting gaijin in Japan to work. Of course, he was laughed out of the place. I think he was a foreign minister for just about 7 months or so. But nevertheless, you had a leader that was able to tell his people an uncomfortable truth that they did not want to hear. And that is what is missing now in Europe writ large, definitely in the UK.
All right, Cheta, let's go for a quick break. When we're back, we'll explore this further, especially through the lens of how politicians are tackling economic hardships, and whether they're telling economic truths, or whether we're flying the flags of symbolism rather than hard truths.
Of the flag of propaganda.
Well, I will leave you to talk about that.
All right.
Welcome back to the Black Paper. My name is Ndukwe Onoha.
And I'm Cheta Wanze.
In the first half of this episode, we spoke about flags, the meaning, and just what the right response should be from councils, from politicians, and from ordinary citizens just trying to go about their business. Now, I want us to also just talk about the hard truths that politicians are either telling or not telling, and how that plays into this whole conversation around further down the line, people raising flags or trying to order the other. Now, Cheta, shared something with you last week. It was an article by Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, saying that white working class kids had been failed by the system. Now, this was on the eve of the GCSE result. And before I go on, congrats to everyone who has received that GCSE result. Oh, excuse me. I hope they were the results you were looking forward to, and I'm sure that Cheta will agree with me that we wish you the very best as you move on to the next phase of your life.
Of course, I mean, we both have young children who are going to be writing these exams at some point soon. So we wish everybody the best, and those who want to finish their educational journey at this point, break a leg. Those who want to continue on to university, break 2 legs.
And maybe somewhere down the line, backbone. But anyway, Bridget Phillipson writes this article, saying white working class kids are being let down by the education system, and because that's if you look at the stats, it may it would tell you what you want to see, because if you look at the 2023 to 2024 summary of of how kids did in their GCSEs, especially maths and English, you'll see that the Chinese had 8.6% of Chinese students had a passing grade of 4+ or 4 and above. And the Indian students, the 3.5% of Indian students had that 4.4+ passing grade. If the Pakistanis had 65.8% of their students pass, Black Africans 69.4% of their students pass, Black Caribbeans 52.1% of their students pass, White British about 61 to 66% average of these groups passed, and then Gypsy and Roma 16.2%. So if you look at this on the face of it, it looks like, oh, whoa, the white working class are being left behind by their peers. However, if you go beneath the numbers and you start asking why, does it tell the story of a system that is being hashed or deliberately overlooking one group, or does it tell the story of other groups working beyond the system to put a lot of pressure on their kids to work even harder, because there's an understanding that you need to work either twice as hard, three times as hard to get the opportunities, especially if you're an immigrant family where you have no recourse to
Expat
public
family.
funds. If you're an expat family, and you have no recourse to public funds, so are the numbers all it's cracked up to be? And is Bridget Phillipson playing to
She's
the
playing
gallery?
politics. She's playing politics. So let's. I was impressed when I read the article. I think it's important to point that out, because let's bear in mind that the article was published a day before the results were released, which told me that she had already seen the results. Mhm. Secondly, it was published in the Telegraph, and if you remember, the Telegraph is called the Tory graph. It caters to the right wing. So for me, it brings us right back to that thing that we've been saying. Rather than telling the hard truths, the politicians, the political class is trying to go after a demographic, which probably is not even listening to them. Now, one thing that Miss Phillipson failed to do was to point out what white posh students are doing. And she also failed to point out what other non-UK white students are doing. Now, if we want to break down the data, and you've read out a lot of it, you'll find that Black African children are performing better than Black Caribbean children. So which begs the question, why didn't, because you could, for the sake of arguments, make the argument, say that, okay, Black African kids are the equivalent to white posh kids, while Black Caribbean kids are the equivalent of white working class kids. After all,
Whoa,
like
that's
I
going to.
said, it's a racist argument. I'm just saying it for the sake of argument. So let's not sacrifice. Don't be a politician. Let's not sacrifice on the altar of political correctness.
No,
Let me make
no,
let me make the points. Let me
but
finish the points,
I
please.
know we have to raise that flag there and say, look, this
Okay,
is
fine. You've
argument.
raised the flag. So can I finish? Because I actually
Please carry
preface
on.
by saying for the sake of argument.
Okay.
Now, you could make those comparisons because Black Caribbeans, on the average, came with the Windrush generation, while Black Africans are coming much earlier and, crucially, are coming at higher educational levels than the Windrush generation. So, the Windrush generation were brought into the UK specifically to aid in rebuilding after the Second World War. It was open for anybody who could afford £8 ticket for a boat cruise. The barriers for Black Africans coming, especially in the latest round of immigration, are significantly higher. So you find that the people who come tend to be more elites in their countries. So what that means is that they will have a tendency to push their children harder towards high educational attainment. And you see this, for example, in the United States, where when you look at educational attainment of African Americans or the Caribbean Americans who moved to the US in the 1920s and 30s, and then more recent African immigrants, the educational attainment is higher. So the real question, which she's not asking, is what is it among people who already have higher educational levels that makes them push their children even more? And that same dynamic is being repeated among the posh white students and the working class white students. But it's a difficult conversation to have. Witness your political reaction of, oh, whoa, a politician after all. So I would accuse you of the same thing that's doing Miss Phillipson. There's a strange problem with the political class nowadays that they don't want to have difficult conversations. And we will not have solutions if we don't confront difficult conversations head on. One of the reasons why the media, for example, the mass media, what they call the mainstream media, is losing a lot of followership for alternatives on the fringes of both the right and the left, is this inability to have difficult conversations. Rant
It,
over.
it, it is quite interesting you mentioned the media. And yes, I must admit, when you said that, my political instinct kicked in. And I had to wait, hang on, let's just preface this, because yeah, it's, on one hand, I agree, it's difficult for us politicians to have these um conversations. It's not
Why?
impossible. No,
When you want
and
to
no,
lead, but you don't want to have difficult
no,
conversations,
no,
how does that work?
and this is why. This is why we've we're in a space where people are looking for, sadly, people are looking for sound bites. So on one hand, yes, you can see politicians find it difficult to have these conversations. On the other hand, I'll also say people don't want to hear, people are always looking for simplistic answers to conversations that have no simplistic origin or simplistic solutions. So it's one of those things where, as a society, whilst the politicians are girding themselves up to start making difficult arguments, people also need to start to be ready to hear things that they will not like. And you see that, I see that every day, going down the street, speaking to residents, and someone says, oh well, this should happen and the council should just do that. I'm trying to tell them, no, there's that one, on one hand, there's that little thing called the law. You have to walk within the ambit of the law. But on the other hand, what you're seeing as, say, the council should just rule up and knock down this building or take this away. The council just can't do that, because you're having to look at the resources, the personnel, in case of, if you have vehicle, the money in the bank, but also crucially what the regulations are saying. So when you then have a Farage and his ilk, for instance, and they come down and say, well, they're not telling the truth, they should do that, and that's just what people want to hear. Everyone gets behind them. And you now find a situation where people suddenly feel that they have to talk in what's that word now? In,
You
in
somehow
symbols.
managed to drag Farage into this when it is Bridget Phillipson that we're talking
Oh
about.
yeah, I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back to
This
Bridget.
you are behaving like an APC person doing party loyalty.
No,
See,
no, I'm going to bring. No, no,
it's
Cheta.
wait, wait,
I
wait,
brought
wait.
this up, didn't I?
One check.
Uh, so I will
Wait,
come back to Bridget
wait,
Phillipson. But carry on.
Okay. See, it is a very simple thing. This thing from where I'm standing has two, probably three factors behind it. Number one, there's a class system. Children of the working class are not encouraged towards higher educational attainment. And how do you see it in, for example, the personnel in the school? So I'll tell a story, and it feeds into a larger national story. A friend of mine in Hall coming from Nigeria, used to work at Schlumberger, all of, good stuff, landed in Hall. His kid got into a state school. And his big complaints to me was that the children were not being pushed by their teachers. So they had to do the pushing. Then suddenly, sometime last year, the school had a change in leadership, including a change in a new trust came and took over. And suddenly, with new personnel, he saw a difference. The school, the children, so his eldest had already written her exams, had passed, is on the way to university. Well, so she should be starting university now. But he's seeing a difference in the younger ones now. Suddenly that they now have teachers who have some ambition, who are pushing them towards some ambition. Not teachers so one of the things that I complain about in the education system in the UK right now is this thing of when you are grading children, you say performing at expected level, exceeding expected level. What happened to the old first, second, third in class? What happened to all of that?
Well, you don't
So
want to hurt people's feelings. That's why people. That's why
and
people get certificate of attendance.
that participation trophy is problematic, completely problematic.
I agree with you.
People need to learn from age 2, if they can, that life is a competition. What you need to focus on is making sure that people learn healthy competition, not unhealthy competition, but giving people the impression that, oh, they just have to do the barest minimum and they will cruise through life. That is putting them on the road to perdition. Now, second story, and this one is not a personal story. There's a school. I think it's Bamford High or Brampton High. I can't remember the exact name. It keeps skipping me for the life of me. But it's a school somewhere in London. Bad performances for years. And suddenly they got a new principal, a new head teacher. happens to be of Nigerian descent. Within 2 years, the school started acing their students routinely end up in Oxford, Cambridge, Warwick, in Imperial College, in the best schools in the country. There was no magic. The funding to the school did not increase. Pool of students that the school was taken from did not change. It's still from the same area. But suddenly it was the personnel and the motivation of the personnel that changed. That is what Ms. Phillips should be trying to address. Instead of these hands wringing, teachers need to be paid properly. That helps with motivation. But having the right kind of teachers. I mean, we all watch Adolescence. Do you think that a school like that, if that is the reflection of the average school in the UK, do you think that they will produce world beaters?
And I agree with you, and which is why I started by saying the problem is that, or rather, ask the question about whether politicians just want to use the talking points or just sound bites rather than the hard truth. And for me, it was quite interesting, as I had mentioned earlier, that this article, Miss Phillipson chose to write it in the Telegraph, which on its own was sending a clear political message that I am trying to reach a particular audience, and then felt the need to use their talking points, uh, rather than speak, say, look, these are the issues, this is the problem, and we have to fix it by uh, by changing our attitudes. Because again, as we've said it, participation trophies, or as we say in Nigeria, thanks for coming. It's a terrible way. It's a terrible way to get children ready for the challenges that will surely come their way. And that's why in my intro to this segment, I spoke about, and you've of course talked about it with the story of your friend as well. Just how, because especially if you've migrated here from any African country, you know that you have no recourse to public funds, but you also believe that education is the stepping stone for your kids to achieve their potential. So you're hard on them. You're giving them that extra lesson. You're limiting their time. Uh, Time they're exposed to either playing games or just faffing around, and you're making sure that there's that joke of you come back with 98% and your parents are asking you, well, the other 2%, what happened to it? There's that continuous strive for
The person that
excellence.
got 100%, does he have two
Does it
heads?
have two heads? These are the things that should be talked about. People are bending their backs to ensure that their children continually perform high. And so it is not so much the state letting down some people, even though there's been under investment in certain areas, under investment in education, in school, that we cannot deny. However, also acknowledge the fact that there are people who are pushing their kids, and for whom high marks is the lowest barrier that their kids will have to cross. Um. So yeah, as you said, Cheta, a rant over as well.
It's,
But
this is a ranting session. Eh?
it is so.
Anyway,
But
the bottom line from my point of view is there are things that the education secretary completely failed to ask. So, in her article, so you may well accuse her of some form of dereliction of duty. Um, I think I've asked those questions. The key thing, and I think this is something that is going to be rather difficult, the class divide.
yeah.
That is the key thing for me. It's the class divide. It's nothing else. Every other thing is just playing to the gallery.
Okay. And talking about playing to the gallery as well, as we round this up, Cheta, one of my biggest frustrations is that when people start talking about and this is tied in to why you see a lot of people now running around saying show your pride, raise the flag. A lot of it was inspired by the questions around migrants in hotels, as we saw in the case in Epping, where people protested and also got a high court injunction. um but what upsets me a lot is that, again, we politicians are not coming out to say, look, all these things you're saying that migrants are getting, that the native population should get, a lot of them are myths. So, for instance, you hear things like, oh, once someone comes off the boat, they are given a phone, they're given internet, they're given a bicycle, they're put up in this hotel, and their lives are made comfortable. It's a myth. Because if you look at
Brings us right back to what I have been saying, and I think I should maybe probably go and stand on what's the highest building in the UK. Probably go and stand on it on top with a talking drum to beat it. The political
no,
class.
no, 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 you need those people that have placards, that have some that you write on cardboard.
No, no, no. You see, talking drum
Just
has this thing of people will hear you before they see you. The thing is, again, we are coming right back to the political class know the truth, but the truth is not sexy. So they quiet their mouths and say something else. They are simply just looking towards the next election. And the unfortunate thing with, for example, Richard Phillips's article, Operation Raise the Colors, all of that is when you create deliberately point of contentions, you remove the incentive to look at what are the necessary steps to address a neglect, an issue of neglect, social neglect. And then you end up minimizing the struggles of other marginalized groups and then end up creating a siege mentality. The problem with creating a siege mentality is you never can tell which direction it will blow. The big picture is this from where I'm standing. The real factor is not race. The real factor is socioeconomic and class. How are they going to overcome that? Because the class system, and if we look at where we both come from, we're both Igbo guys. We don't have a class system. So we don't we the Igbo ethos is only ekwe. We can achieve anything. But I have met people in the UK who believe it's a mental block. I am working class, I am not going beyond this. This conversation has to go beyond just a simple racial lens and address that really complex issue of creating a properly egalitarian society beyond class and the advantages that class or the disadvantages that class brings. But I am not very sure that the British political class is ready for that conversation.
Cheta, can I just say, you sound like you've signed up to Jeremy Corbyn's yet to be named party.
No, I haven't. I mean, I'm at pains again to point out that I lean more conservative, not Western conservatism, the way where the whole racialized thing that we're saying. I am socially conservative. That's my own personal leaning. I think that the main driver, and this is something we should talk about at some future points because your party is being cannibalized. I think that it's Gaza that is driving Jeremy Corbyn's party more than anything else. I think that there are many people on the left who are socially liberal and all of that who wouldn't touch him with a long pole because of the fact that he has been labeled as anti-Semitic, whether it is true or not. But I think that it is. So what is going to happen is that his party, especially given the presence of Zara Sultana, will end up being a lightning rod that will attract a lot of the Muslim votes. And that's where it will probably fail because people will use that to sort of smear them that it's the Muslim party. And in the current climates, I don't think that is a recipe for success.
All right, Cheta, thank you very much. I think on that note, and on that cautious note to your party, we'll draw the curtain.
My party?
No, no, no. The Jeremy Corbyn's party is called your party for now.
Oh, okay. Oh, I had completely see, given the nature of what I do, I'm completely apolitical. Not apolitical. I'm completely neutral. So like again, I would personally socially conservative, but I'm not a member of any party
No, I
here
think
or in Nigeria.
I think you would find that interestingly, a lot of uh, people from the continent will be socially conservative, and that's also quite maybe it's something to talk about in the future. How we are able to distinguish between our social leaning, uh, or how we're able to separate our social leaning from our political choices. Because you would find that yes, a lot of us are socially conservative. However, politically, we might go one way or the other. And final thoughts from you, Cheta.
None. I think I've said everything.
Oh,
Basically,
okay.
just to recap, it's not a bad thing for people to have national pride. Um, it's not. It's the UK needs to have a serious conversation about its class system, but the political class is not ready to have those tough conversations. So the UK is going to keep shooting in the dark.
So, in other words, we need more balls as politicians. See you at the next one.
See you at the next one.